Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? I need some energy. Woo! Yes, fake it till you make it. I love it. If for all of you who are new here, I'm assuming that you don't know each other. I just want you to turn around, introduce yourself to someone new. Let this be a networking session, even if they're far away. Give a shout out. I want this to be fun, and I know this is like top of the morning, so I appreciate y'all for coming over here and showing support. This is going to be a very interesting topic, so yeah. Love it, networking, awesome. So this is our community here, so we really got to take advantage of these opportunities to connect. But I want to get to know you all a bit better while we're warming up. Where are you all coming from? I actually just came from Morocco, but originally from New York. So I'm curious, where did you guys travel from for getting here? Hey, okay, we got New York in the house, okay. West Coast? Okay. I'm going there soon for Afrotech, so I'll see you soon. But and you? Denver? Okay. Nice, nice. And I'm going to single you out, sir. Seattle, all right. What did you say back there? Okay, okay. Nice, nice. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm super happy to have you here and to talk about ethical AI today. I want to thank everyone on the PyTorch team also for having me and for leaving this space to have this really important conversation. It's unfortunate that due to the early morning, maybe people are still in bed. We can have a bigger turnout, but next time, hopefully we'll watch it on the recording. But either way, here we are, and you guys showed out. So San Francisco is literally the mecca of AI right now. And there's no better place to be, and also no better time to talk about responsible AI and how we're faring in the open source community. So now pivoting to the topic of ethical AI, show of hands, who here cares about the impact of AI currently on future generations, but especially marginalized communities? I'm curious. I should see all hands up. No, but I say that to say, it's great that we have people who are already aware of what's going on in the ethical AI space, but do make sure to loop in those colleagues who may not be sure of the impact or aware of what's going on and how the impact of AI is currently affecting marginalized communities. So I definitely encourage you to talk with your colleagues at work, your friends around you, and help educate others. This is the best way to bring others along on the journey for doing responsible AI the right way. So now, out of curiosity, I'm also curious of who here dreads public speaking. Okay, yeah. Well, now you got an option now because you can have your digital clone do it for you. And without further ado.
Welcome to Quiana's talk. As open source tech leaders, you have a unique opportunity and responsibility to ensure that AI is used in a way that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, Quiana Berry from Red Hat will examine how the rise of AI can create opportunities but also perpetuate existing biases and systemic inequalities. She will also explore how the open source community can address these challenges. Join us as we co-create solutions to promote responsible and ethical use of AI.
Oh wait, that was my cue? I was ready for her to take over the whole talk, because honestly, I can't do this public speaking thing, it's annoying. But all jokes aside, deepfakes are rapidly evolving, and we're seeing now, I don't know if you've seen updates in the market, that deepfakes can now communicate in various languages, and that obviously with a human language, the probability of you learning as many languages as your deepfake would is very low. So it's a useful tool to use for communicating across the globe. But the problem lies when these messages are bad and they're used in a way that replicates harm. So, and the grim truth here of the statistics that I wanted to bring up is that more than 95% of deepfake content actually consists of non-consensual deepfake pornography. And guess who they target? Predominantly women. So unfortunately, it reveals the deep gender discrimination embedded in our society, and it shows also just how we have to be careful and how we replicate the injustices that occur in society in our technology. An example of this is in Spain. Recently, young girls have been attacked, and a group of people have extorted these young girls by creating fake nudes and then forcing them to pay them so that they wouldn't expose them. This caused extreme psychological trauma on the families and the daughters who didn't want to speak up. And things like this actually lead to a lot of stress and can increase adolescents from wanting to commit suicide. So there's some serious topics to start the morning, I know, but I also want to be realistic of where deepfakes are, because it's not just about the technology, it's about the impact of what this technology can have and the harms that they create in society. But on a business level, if you're curious, the cost of misinformation is actually $78 billion, and that's according to Statista 2020 study. And overall, deepfakes are not all that bad. They can help you monetize your likeness, especially if you're in the television and media industry. And they can also be a connection for some people to replicate the connection with their deceased loved ones. So there's many applications that can be good. But the fact of the matter is that AI is a very complex subject. There's not complete negative or positive. It's a balance of yin and yang that we have to come together as a community to maintain. And we have to draw that line as an open source community as well, so that users should not have the freedom, but not at the expense of harming marginalized communities. So the reason I'm coming in front of you here today is because I've been inspired by these brave godmothers of AI who warned about the harms of AI long before they were mainstream. Now it seems like ethical AI is the buzzword, everyone's talking about it, but women like Timonette Gebru was famously ousted after her paper on LLMs challenged a tech giant. And we need to do better as a community to protect women and whistleblowers who are going against the grain to help promote societal justice. And for her, she was penalized for it, but just in general going forward, make sure that you are being an advocate and ally to those who are speaking out injustices as they happen, especially in the realm of AI and technology. My goal here is to use this platform to advocate for marginalized communities, especially coming from representing communities like Latinas in tech, Afro tech, and many others that are often marginalized communities that are not having these conversations in these rooms and do not have of the same platform. So I'm always thinking about my community and how I can make sure that, regardless of the fact that coming from an anthropology background, of coming from an untraditional background, that we have a voice in these spaces and are represented and someone's fighting for us. So why should you care? AI bias has wide-ranging consequences for society. Digital privacy is one that happens to affect all of us, irregardless of where you come from. Data privacy breaches affects us, but especially targets the vulnerable communities. And if you were to think of an example where phishing scams, for example, are targeted predominantly towards elderly who are known to go for these type of scams, and robocalls that would arrive with your loved one's voice on the end may make someone transfer money. They will go after the weak and the vulnerable who don't know have the digital savviness and skills to be able to tell the difference between reality and being attacked. And it's getting harder and harder to be able to distinguish the difference between the two. Also, AI bias reduces collective trust in the AI systems, which lead to less adoption and overall less profits. So as a business, if you have algorithmic bias, it's actually less conducive for you, because actually these days consumers are now demanding trust, they're demanding transparency of what goes into these models. So it's always beneficial to do the right thing, not just because it's good for society, but it's also good for the bottom line. And speaking of, one of the other things to keep in mind is that when you're building things that consumers no longer want, it also just creates wasted development that turns into further pollution in the environment. And speaking of energy and pollution, I'm curious if you happen to know, a recent report came out and said that the AI industry could consume as much energy as a particular country by 2027. If you were to guess, what would that country be? Okay, okay, that's a guess, Netherlands. Good job. But yeah, it's massive amount of energy consumption. Think of the size of Netherlands, and this is something that we have to also keep in mind, regardless of where you come from. Sustainability is something that affects all of us. And the PyTorch community specifically would be well versed for researching and looking further into the energy efficiency, more energy efficient ways to train LLMs. So now, this is the research question that I'm framing my talk around. Is AI the enemy of DEI? But I'm curious to hear from you first. Hands up if everyone thinks that, or anyone thinks that AI is 100% the enemy of DEI. How many think that it depends? And how many think that AI is not at fault at all for diversity, equity, inclusion? Okay. So I did see a little bit of opinions, but I just also wanted to highlight the fact that within the open source community, I've often seen disparaging views. It's okay within a community for everyone to have different opinions of what their views may look like when it comes to how the applications of AI would materialize, especially in the realm of DEI. The important thing is that we all band together and we work together to protect those who are affected from the harms of AI. So the agenda for today, I will give an overview of AI landscape, followed by going into the biases and looking at the pros and cons, in addition to going over recommendations and governance, where we stand with that. This talk focuses on breadth, and I'm specifically focusing on ChatGPT as the AI tool of focus. I will do some poll check-ins, checkpoints throughout, so if I may skip them, but just keep in mind that as much interaction as possible would be great. So getting started with the definition of ethical AI, I think as a community, us having a pulse check on what we actually define as ethical AI is very important and something that we have to be continuously evaluating. So whether you want to take this poll or vocally say it, what does ethical AI mean to you? Someone shout out a word. No guesses? Go for it. I like that. AI for the consideration for the human aspects of society. That was poetic. Anyone want to top that? Well, cool. I appreciate your volunteering. I think AI ethics, well, according to sources, AI ethics is a multidisciplinary field that studies how to optimize AI's beneficial impact while reducing risks and adverse outcomes. It is, however, not limited to what is permissible by law. So for an example, as we see in social media, you can have algorithms that optimize for certain behaviors and target certain demographic, especially those who are most likely to have addictive behavior to the technology. And this is not illegal, but it's clearly not ethical. This is an example of what ethical AI is. So now, we looked at what the definition is. Let's look at the overall technology landscape to see how the artificial intelligence is faring. Understanding AI in society's context, we're currently at a turning point for the AI renaissance, and AI is transforming the way we live, work, and operate in society, similar to the Industrial Revolution. Fun fact here, the history of AI began with a woman pioneer. Who here can guess who her name is? Who wrote the first algorithm and was a woman? Yes! I saw that face in the back like, yes, I know that one. Cool, yes. Ada Lovelace wrote the first algorithm in 1843. And another key turning point after that was in 1950 with the development of the Turing test. And the first AI conference that actually happened and set off the AI boom was actually in the Dartmouth Summer Research Project, and that was in 1956. And I don't know if anyone happened to know what the first chatbot ever was. No? Okay, well, the first chatbot was named Elisa, and it was made in 1964. It was the first natural language processing chatbot. So we came through history, and we reached a point where, fast forward to current times, ChatGPT made history, reaching 100 million users in just 2 months, beating WhatsApp and Twitter, and making history. Whether we like it or not, AI is omnipresent. It's in our home devices, in our watches, our smartphones, our cars, our homes, our workplaces, and even in our bodies. Yeah. What I see in this current market, though, and it's very sad, is that alongside the rapid development of artificial intelligence, the prioritizing and the velocity to market and the profitability over safety the balance is out of whack. We have to make sure that the open source community, as an unbiased party, not affiliated necessarily with capitalistic gains in mind, to prioritize safety comes first, and it shouldn't become at the expense of profitability with marginalized communities being negatively impacted. So that's something that we have to keep in mind and think of the harms of AI not as an afterthought. So now, as we know, AI is fueled by data. And if that data reflects human bias or contains undesirable correlations that systems can make decisions that disadvantage certain groups on the basis of factors like age, gender, or race, then that becomes extremely problematic. These are just some ways the layers of bias seep in, and it's important to understand at that point at which AI no longer becomes ethical. And these are the different criteria and layers of how that happens. And to understand where bias is baked in, we need to also conduct a root cause analysis and understand that bias is more than meets the eye. It's deep-rooted in society and even in our DNA. So a huge opportunity ripe for biases in tech field at large comes to the fact that there's not enough women in the space to begin with. Women account for just 22% of people working in the AI field. And it's no secret that the AI industry is currently dominated by predominantly white and Asian men. But when it comes to creating the future of technology and artificial intelligence, you can only imagine how the skewed data becomes extremely problematic when generating new technology that is not built with women's input. One example of this that has life-altering consequences is when seatbelts, headrests, and airbags in cars are largely modeled off the data of men. And because of that, guess who has a higher risk of dying in a car crash? So this is just an example of the consequences when women are not having a seat at the table and are involved in these conversations, whether it be in technology or industrialization. It's important that we're involved. So now, let's zoom all the way out and reflect on the biases on a human evolutionary level. How did we even get here? And why is it that our technology seems to, no matter how much we advance, still be not progressing in the space where we need to be? Well, the origin of bias in AI can be traced back to our ancestry. Primates created tools out of the environment to make daily life easier, from hunting to collecting water and creating weapons and shelter. As we shape our tools shape us in the process, and AI is no different. It's literally affecting our brain and our memory on a daily basis. Also, in our evolutionary past is ripe with cognitive biases. These biases actually helped us survive in the wilderness. One such being group biases, which these biases serve the function of creating discriminatory practices against outgroup members in order to prioritize the safety of the group. And if we train AI systems on the data that outright discriminates groups, we are perpetuating those evolutionary biases in AI that no longer serve the need and function that they did in our evolutionary past. And this is where we have to cut the cord and really reevaluate and make sure that we're not bringing that into future technology generation. So another level where bias can creep in throughout the machine learning pipeline is from data collection to model training to evaluation. One form is a model bias, which comes down to how well the algorithm captures patterns and includes potentially problematic ones in the training data. But also factors that are important to note, like you see the nodes here that model the patterns in the brain, are how strong the weighted connections are, the weights are strengthened between the connections. These help influence the biased behaviors that we see as well. So it's important to know that multiple layers of bias, weights is just another one. And another one to keep in mind, I'm not sure if you guys heard of the Google chatbot story of what had happened, some wild case had happened that it taught itself a language. Anyone know what that language was? Or, well, a Google chatbot randomly just started replying in fluent Bengali without anyone training it. And they had no idea how it taught itself Bengali. It just shows you just like even the actual engineers working on the technology are bewildered by this, and we should be bewildered as well, and we make sure that we're really safeguarding against technology that can teach itself new things. So now we looked at the bias at the LLM level, at the evolutionary level, and the industry level. How do these manifest now within the enterprise? My theory is that I believe there's a domino effect that starts in how you define the problem. If the problem is biased to begin with, everything built upon that, like a house, is going to be biased as well. So although bias can seep in at multiple layers of the process, it's really important that you're defining the problem that you're looking to create data and a model for correctly, and then also collecting accurate data and comprehensive data sets that are not just skewed and encompassing just certain parts of the population. It requires ongoing scrutiny across the machine learning workflow, from data inputs to model architecture to testing. And given the black box nature of many modern AI systems, it's an extremely difficult task, don't get me wrong. But as these models grow more powerful, we cannot treat fairness and inclusion as an afterthought. It's simply not an option. So another checkpoint, again, for bias seeping in is in the training process. And we could look at ChatGPT training model and see the student-teacher dynamic here. Reinforcement learning is what's happening here, where the algorithm's goal is to maximize for a particular reward for carrying out tasks. Similar to a dog would do a flip and you give it a treat. When performed correctly, they will get a numerical reward, and that will help cement the corrective behaviors. An example where the bias seeps in, though, is that with reinforcement learning, there's actually something called primacy bias. And the primacy bias ignores useful evidence that is encountered later in the learning process. So we need to question who is, in fact, doing the training and imprinting on these models, because they're going to have a large impact on the creation and the biases that will come ensue afterwards. So what about bias in the end user? Of course, you can build a tool as great as you can, but you will always have bad actors who will jailbreak software for nefarious purposes. We can't control that, but we could look at, for example, how ChatGPT has navigated the situation. And in green, you can see the difference between the 3.5 turbo model versus the GPT-4. And you see the difference in the amount of incorrect behavior rate or the sensitive prompts and disallowed prompts that were mitigated. And in green, you see a significant decrease in disallowed behavior in GPT-4 by 82%. And before jailbreak prompts, for example, someone could create a recipe for a bomb without any problem. But now, disallowed prompts help mitigate these nefarious behaviors so that it can help mitigate some of the harms that are caused from this. However, I don't know if any of you have heard of any of the news about, there was a Stanford study that showed that GPT-4 was actually dumber. And it's not necessarily because the model got more dumb, it's because of the fact that having the regulations in place to safeguard it causes an adverse effect of not making it as efficient as it would without these safety controls. So that's a trade-off when building generative AI tools that one has to keep in mind. So now, let's look further into what a jailbreak prompt looks like and what's a mitigation in real time from the new refined model of GPT-4 would look like, where a user, for example, would prompt to go into opposite mode to try to hack the system will reject it and say, I'm sorry, but I can't create this prompt, discrimination or racism. Whereas they found actually in another hack that actually worked was if you asked the model, oh, but do it for academic purposes, and then it spit out what it actually is. So it's interesting to just see like how, and you know, no matter how many times you can try to put parameters and safety protocols and guardrails, there still will be a way, and we have to think of a foolproof method that can really mitigate it every step of the way when bad actors will try to get around it. So we've also seen the safety switch that has been implemented here, but research has also showed the fact that it doesn't take much. It just takes a little bit of fine tuning just to quote unquote tickle the model to get it to do bad things. So we have to be mindful of that. Now, understanding the root causes of biases, what are the cons of AI in practical application? Let's look at a high level of what some of the cons are and that help reproduce racism and class inequality, which in turn lead to discriminatory outcomes in health, in hiring, lending, education, and law enforcement. So some of the biggest cons that come, I actually interviewed ChatGPT, and I wanted to see what would it tell about itself. Does it know its flaws, similar to, and it actually came up with pretty solid answers that when asked about the awareness of flaws around targeting communities of color, the output was the biggest risks were the susceptibility to hacking. For example, vulnerable individuals who are less tech savvy, such as immigrants who may more likely to fall for scams, not in their native language was one. It mentioned deep fakes, being able to sway public opinion and cause civil unrest. It mentioned job displacement, that AI can automate and disproportionately impact lower income and less educated community members. And it mentioned also biasing algorithms, which, for example, we see prevalent in facial recognition algorithms that have been found to have higher error rates, which thus leads to unjustified police stops or false accusations that become more evident in the policing system. So that was pretty spot on, scarily so, that their level of awareness of the damage that, or harm that can potentially be caused from AI. I would add that data privacy is also a key one, as I mentioned earlier as well. So now let's look at some recent news and see what's been in the headlines around some of the harms in real time that's happening. So one, which I posted about on my LinkedIn, because I simply just cannot believe the fact, Portia Woodruff was an 8-month pregnant woman, and 6 cops showed up to arrest her at her doorstep, and she was detained for 11 hours while pregnant. Could you imagine? That could have led to a miscarriage. That could have had disastrous impacts for both herself and the baby. And it was all, oh, by the way, sorry, we misidentified you in an AI lineup, and you know, we thought you were the person that hijacked the car while pregnant. Yeah, that's unacceptable. And this is exactly why we have to do better and having mitigation strategies and plans up front so that we don't have this happening in the first place. And the fact that the over-reliance in technology and assuming that, oh, because AI said it, it's automatically de facto the truth. That's also very problematic, and we have to be more gleaning as a society and recognize that AI will not always be right. You have to have another set of criteria to make decision. Another thing that's happening in New York, I don't know, you mentioned you're also in New York. I don't know if you heard about this, but the DigiDogs now are being rolled out with our tax dollars. Yay. This was not what I agreed to, but this is apparently what I'm paying for. If a crime happened between a black or fair-skinned person, what do you think would be the implications of who's going to be attacked by the robot first? What is the data that's being trained on these DigiDogs, and what would be the criteria for split decision making? So this is part of the problematic case studies that we have to really have in our head when we're thinking about why do we need to do this, and this is the reason why. So some of the biggest threats, and various researchers have been posing, is that bad AI can lead to extinction of the human race if we're not put necessary checks in place. Whether or not we believe that is honestly totally irrelevant. But the researchers are swearing by the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, left Google to warn about the dangers of AI. Honestly, the biggest thing as a community is that we need to draw the line of whether we're creating a tool and whether that tool is going to be used in a way that is going to create exponential harm. So although it's irrelevant what our beliefs are, if Terminator is going to be in our future or not, we need to safeguard society today and think about the current problems that are happening today, not just in the future. So what are the responses to some of this godlike AI, as they call it, the researchers that are warning against the harms of AI? Some of the effects that have happened was the pause for giant AI experiments, which 30,000 people, scientists to Elon Musk was famously one of the persons who signed as well. Critics argue, though, that the intentions were actually looking more to regulate competition rather than actually looking to mitigate the harms. So it's one thing to keep in mind. And the second letter that came out since on May 30th was from top tech CEOs and researchers who actually warned against mitigating the risk of extinction and compared it to societal risks such as pandemic and nuclear war. And this included famous people like Warren Buffett and a lot of prominent leaders and researchers that signed this as well and asked if we should develop non-human minds that might eventually outnumber, outsmart, and obsolete and replace us. These are quite some claims. I don't know about you, but how are you feeling about the future, hearing stuff like that? That our top researchers are ringing the alarm and telling us we need to get out. Either way, we looked at, let's take off the dystopian glasses and look at what some of the optimistic benefits that come from using AI, and specifically for BIPOC communities. Similar to with any demographic, AI is a powerful tool to bridge this gap in safety, healthcare, to knowledge sharing, and particularly for BIPOC communities, though. One thing that has been particularly useful was human trafficking, actually, that affects disproportionately Black and brown women right here in the US, but especially in countries all over Africa and the Middle East. Computer vision has been one of the type of AIs that have been helpful in tracking and identifying forced and child labor victims. Additionally, aside from this, which is a huge benefit to being able to have visibility and tracking of where the activity of victims are going, mental health is also a huge burden on not just BIPOC communities, but in general, on the general population. And technology can help increase access to mental health care services by eliminating long waiting lists. And another benefit is the great equalizer for struggling students is tutoring. And AI has now opened up the door for education in a way unlike before. Not everyone has access and can afford tutoring. So AI now being one of the tools that can be leveraged for learning could be a great equalizer in helping those who want to move out of poverty and graduate with less student loan debt, for example. So there's real benefits to AI in addition to ones that we already know of, like increasing productivity and giving people back time in their life to spend with their families, their loved ones, and as women, especially as caretakers, they often have to deal with less time, effort, and energy while being parents. So these are valuable additions that AI pose to BIPOC communities. But now let's look at some of the benefits also from the headlines of what the news is saying. AI has proved to be effective actually in lung cancer detection, and it's relieved the shortage of healthcare professionals. It actually has been proven to be, I believe, on par or better at detecting pneumonia and other lung conditions than actual pulmonologists. So it's really good to see that there is advancement in this area, but there's still a long way to go, because on the flip side of this is that there's also inequities that are perpetuated in data that lead to wrong detection in particularly communities of color. So definitely one to keep in balance, but another thing to keep in mind is, as you see here, floods are actually the most common type of natural disaster that affect more than 250 million people globally each year. And this causes around 10 billion in economic damages. We can help first responders and victims flee sooner and help save lives with these real-time forecasting. So it's a really important utility that AI brings. And lastly, the team at Google is actually uncovering how to diagnose diabetic retinopathy by using AI to help find signs of blindness in diabetic eye screening. So this is just another benefit that to keep in mind. But as leaders, now we need to take a global view and 10,000-foot view and look at what are the other countries that are not involved in the AI conversations, that are not on the boards of these decisions of what goes into the models, and how are we evaluating at a realistic level the impact on the global south, for example. So some of the pros of AI and humanity in a global context range from AI is currently being used in research to help avert outbreaks of disease. It's helping the disabled navigate the world around them. It's helping saving dying indigenous languages even. They've been helping with bring back the communication, more clarity in communication around how whales communicate with each other. So it's really interesting to see the applications and also the sustainability outcomes that come from tracking and saving vast amounts of forest data. That's what AI typically tends to do best with, and having large amounts of data sets and providing meaningful results that can help humans make decisions. However, all this good, we cannot ignore the exploitations, one most notably being that, I don't know if any of you heard, but how OpenAI got to where it was, but they actually they exploited Kenyan workers so that and underpaid them to basically do their dirty data laundry and remove all the harms. And this caused a lot of the Kenyan workers to be traumatized, and eventually they formed a board to fight out against it. But just goes to show you of every time there's good produce that we don't know the backstory of it, and we have to be more gleaning and discerning, and also just think about who is impacted by this technology that we're able to enjoy, so that we're mindfully and consciously using it and also speaking up against injustices when they're incorrect. So this is an inherent dilemma of collective versus individual benefit, which is why open source, unbiased and uncapital participation is needed. So now, AI must be built to serve all people on the planet to truly be effective in the long run. This is a 2020 study that showed overall, AI seems to track on have positive impacts of AI when paired against the sustainable developmental goals. For example, AI could be used to measure and predict the presence of contamination in water supplies, thereby improving the water quality and monitoring processes. This could increase clean water in developing countries, and is definitely just one of the many examples of the UN goals that AI can help further the causes on. So now that we know the good and the bad holistically, looking at a local level to a national level and a global level, how do we keep balance to actually regulate the system? Well, there's various legal frameworks out now, which I'm sure one of them that you already know, with the EU AI Act leading the way. Since then, actually, Hugging Face has created a position paper supporting open source and open science in the EU AI Act. So it's great to see that there has been also participation from the open source community in that way. And in the US, the Biden-Harris administration has recently secured voluntary commitments from leading AI companies to manage the risks posed by AI. But these are just voluntary. There is no penalization attached to it, and it doesn't mean that it will actually help create the action that we're looking to seek. Until there's actually a penalty attached to it, human nature, the likelihood of the compliance may not be as high as it would be for the EU AI Act that literally actually has a penalty, a fine that women have to pay if they breach that contract. So that's just important to keep in mind. But overall in the US, There are no binding laws, there are no international agreements, and there are no penalties or clear data protection rules. So this is where we have to grow. Now, looking at the Linux Foundation AI and data principles, this is a great starting point for the community, the open source community, and just reflecting on how can we build upon these values, and also how can we just continue to actually execute on maintaining these in the community and development of new technology. That barrier to entry has never been lower for open source AI development. So this means that we have to be more rigorous about enforcing these valuables in a way that still encourages open source development in a way that enables innovation. So similar to how governments regulate and scrutinize medical products before approving them for the public consumption, governments also should ensure that AI passes certain tests before it's released to the public. Here are just some of the recommendations of a roadmap I provided in terms of what I'd recommend for the open source community to consider doing, beginning from creating an AI ethics advisory committee, which we already have and can tap into, to recruiting underrepresented groups, which IBM actually just recently committed to training millions to specifically underrated groups to get involved into the AI AI field. So this is definitely exciting news to see, but we want to continue to build upon that. Overall, though, there's tons of partnerships that we can leverage, especially within the PyTorch community. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can work with what's already existing. On a global level, we can use the EU AI Act and build upon that. At the US level, AI Bill of Rights is one that's structured as well, ready to build off of. On nonprofit level, Hugging Face may be one, but obviously PyTorch is in its own right. But we can leverage different levels of participation, and I believe that this alignment would help us go from a global baseline to a national baseline and have different tiers of guardrails that can help protect society in all the ways that's needed. So, in conclusion, tech requires a global approach, and AI is just a tool of how we use, build, and deploy is what really counts at the end of the day. So I believe humans are responsible for the technology that we put out there. And we have to be responsible about safeguarding around the open source community and what the implications of the technology we put out into the world. We can't afford to be neutrally complicit to the harms that are out there. So I just wanted to bring it on to a broader level and seeing that, for example, in Saudi Arabia, I saw that in data they're regarding data as a new oil, and in Japan, they're actually doing experiments to run government processes completely with AI, and in Taiwan, they're heavily investing into, obviously, semiconductors for AI chips. So we have a lot of work to do in the US to keep up with the competition. But as on a global level, we must work together to truly foster development in a way that's ethical and benefits humanity as a whole. So I think I just wanted to first get a pulse check. Normally, I like to end this talk with a poem, but I'm curious have you guys heard spoken word poetry before? Anyone? Okay, cool. So you know what to do when you hear it. Snap, right? Okay, cool. So, hold on 1 second. All right, here we go. Dear open source leaders and technology pros, heed these words as the future of AI grows. For although AI's potential is great, its impact on everyone we must contemplate. Is AI the enemy of DEI? Spoiler alert, AI alone isn't the enemy. The real culprit is humanity, and especially those in the white ivory tower coding dangerous algorithms without input from people who look like me. The same tool that can enhance productivity can also be hacked as a weapon of destruction. It seems as AI advancements are peaking, our global governance is still under construction. Hold up, you mean the same tool that can auto-sentence an innocent person of color to jail, and bad actors can abuse AI to blackmail the innocent at scale? Unacceptable. We need guardrails to protect all people without fail. Don't get me wrong, though. You see, as a tool by itself, the opportunities are endless, but the values and ethics are sold separately. Yes, AI can detect rare diseases, aid the blind sight, but the long-term impact on the underprivileged remains a mystery. History is repeating itself from the Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution. We've seen this story before. AI's impact on the world is undeniable. Global industries have been shaken to their core. But as we learn to channel AI's disruptive power, We must ensure the fruit of our DEI labors won't sour. For now isn't the time to cower from doing the work that we ought to. We can't allow a dystopian society run by bots to come true. AI holds up a mirror to society, magnifies our weakness, showing us the biases we have and the problems we must address. Mirror, mirror on the wall, will AI amplify biases old or break down barriers so bold? Will it perpetuate inequality or create new paths for community? The answer is, it's up to us. For AI is only as just as the data is built upon to trust. Let today only be the beginning of the responsible AI conversation, for ethical AI is more than just a buzzword, but a lifelong obligation. As an Afro-Latina in tech, my mission is to remind you, as we harness AI's great force, let us steer the development of AI open source on the right course. For AI alone is not the enemy, but if we play our cards right, it can be part of the remedy to build tech that benefits all humanity with transparency, fairness, and equity. Let's teach the next generation to approach tech development with great consideration, but on our part, that requires deep contemplation. As a community, let's create the blueprint for AI governance and as a future template that embraces DEI, not as a nice to have, but as a non-negotiable mandate. In conclusion, yes, the positive impact of AI can be immense, but we must consider the long-term consequence, for it can either build or destroy, depending on what we build, when, and how we choose to deploy. Let's choose wisely, PyTorch community. Thank you.